Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning.
Welcome. Okay, so welcome to the kickoff for the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for Regions 1, 3, and 9. Very excited to be here. This is a process that we began recruiting for back in May. So you all have gone through the wait once you put in your application, and then you were selected. You were selected by a handful of committees who actually reviewed all of your applications and said, these are the people who will help us to shape our region plan. So way to go on that. Congratulations to everyone for being appointed. Okay, so we have, who's in the room now? We have the SAC groups here for the first time ever. We also have staff from around the county. We're gonna go around and introduce everyone in just a moment, but we will go through some of our, let's see, our housekeeping thing. Looks like you all have gotten your food, which is good. If you haven't, if you need some kind of sustenance during the meeting, it is all out in the hallway. So you have your coffee, your beverages, and you have some bagels and fruit. So please help yourself. Make sure that you get something to eat and to drink. If you have not seen the bathrooms yet, they are, if you head back to the way that you came in, where the entrance is, but you head left, you'll see a sign that is for the restrooms, and they're just around that corner to the right. There's also a water fountain there if you brought a water bottle and you'd like to refill it. Oh yes, and trash cans. Trash cans and recycling, right on the other side of that middle door there. Thank you in advance for helping us keep this space clean. Next slide, please. Okay, on to the agenda. I'm sure you all have read this and memorized it. You know it by heart. We are going to be trying to build alignment here on our expectations. We also want to know what your priority issues are for your regions. This is a chance for all of us to learn from one another on what's most important to each of you in your areas. First, OPD staff will provide an overview of the region planning process, so we all start on the same page. Then we'll spend the rest of the meeting listening to you. We want to know what is most important in your community, and we designed that Love It, Fix It, Doing the exercise that you have the presentations for. If you put your slides in there. Yes. We have region 1 in the front, we have region 3 in the middle, and we have region 9 in the rear. Alrighty, we also want to start thinking about the vision statement. So what is it that you want to see in your area over the next 20 years? You'll see there are posters around the room, and there are dots on the table. That gives you an idea of how we're going to work through this exercise a little bit later. And of course, at the end of the meeting, sure everyone's looking forward to seeing the county executive and taking some photos. Oh, good idea. If you haven't already, put your phones on silent or on airplane mode. One of those settings. And just another note, we are presenting this via Zoom. So there are some folks from outside of this room who are watching. So please, if you could keep the side combos to a minimum, because our devices that are on the table are very touchy. That's actually why we're not using a microphone right now. So please be careful with any side conversation. Alrighty, so now let's introduce some staff. I'm gonna go from the rear of the room to the front and have everyone please stand up and wave when I get to your name. So first we're gonna start with region 9. So if I could have Jesse, Levy, Sand, and Eric Ketterling. And we also have Mike Stringer, who is over here on the side. And is Courtney here?
Not
Not yet, okay. So Courtney Winston from CES or the Office of Community Engagement and Constituent Services will be joining us in a little bit. But Vincent is here. Yeah, Vincent is here for Region 3. We have. Yeah.
Well, all regions.
Well, of
But
course.
today.
And today he's here to sit in with Region 3. So Region 3 staff, we have Andrew Lazara, Desiree Williams, and Patrick Hughes. And Vincent, you kind of waved to everyone already, but yeah. All right, so up to Region 1, we have Sam Myers, Mark Wilgonger, and Erica Chapman, who's on the slide. We also have Hannah Thompson,
And she's on her way.
who will be joining us from CECS as well. Yes. All right, so now to our leadership and support staff. We have Felicia Hutchinson. There she is in the back there. And we also have Cindy Carrier, who just joined us. Welcome, Cindy. Yes, she is the planning administrator for the long range planning section. And then we have Christina Pompa. There we go. Yes, thank you. Christina Pompa, who is, she is in charge of the entire planning division, not just long range planning. So she's a great wealth of information if anyone has questions throughout the meeting. Now up to the front, we have our planning and zoning officer, Jenny Jarakowski. Morning, everybody. And last but not least, and next on the floor, we have PCAO, Mr. Jansen Evelyn. Yeah, you're it.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Jansen Evelyn. I want to first start by saying I do not have the level of energy that Mrs. Val had Saturday morning. I've not had coffee yet. This is the most that I can muster right now, but I really want to just kind of level set and say, on behalf of the county exec, and he'll be here to say his own remarks, but on behalf of the county exec and OPZ leadership, thank you so much for stepping up and deciding to volunteer to do this work. Many of you, and I look around the room and I see a lot of the names. I've recognized the names because me and other staff, we reviewed so many resumes, so many applications, and so now it's really good to put faces to names. And whether it's Region 1, Region 3, or 9, the work that you're doing, I mean, this is gonna sound a little like flowery. The work that you're doing is critical and is important. And the reason it's critical and the reason it's important is because for so long, land use and the way land use has been done for decades has not always been right. It's not always been equitable. You've had situations where you just opened up everything to sprawl development, and as a result, the environment suffers. For years, certain people had access and others did not have access. So this work, when I say it's critical, I mean, when you tell your family this morning, hey, I'm going at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, do some region planning to make sure that my region ultimately, not tomorrow, but 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, it looks different. It looks better. It looks greener. It looks more equitable. I mean, your partners, your kids, your friends, their eyes probably glazed over. But it's that important to me. I always tell people and I'm a sci-fi geek, so I'll admit it, but there's a film that was very seminal to my life. It's called The Matrix. And there was a point where for him to understand the truth, he had to take the red pill. I always tell people land use is the red pill in the Matrix. It is singularly the most important issue in how you can address the many inequities in this community, whether it's lack of economic investment, whether it's rising crime and over policing, whether it's who has access to schools and resources. And I mean, it's that important to me. And I think that it's that important to you too, which is why you're here on a rainy Saturday morning. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your sacrifice, and I appreciate the gift that you guys are going to give us as you help shape your communities. But now flowery stuff aside, this is also the most complicated thing you can do. As you sit here, today is nice. You're gonna hear speeches from people like me, the county exec, et cetera. But over the next year, you will be the individuals that are at your table, you will have disagreements with. You will not see eye to eye because you all have different visions for how you want the community that you've spent so much time in, whether you did, or you plan on spending so much time if you're a newer transplant, how you want it to look, not just for you, but for your kids and for your grandkids. And this is where patience, grace, having an open ear, this is where it all comes into play. Because ultimately, how your community will look down the road, it will be built on compromise, it will be built on competing values. And again, I think this is important work. And thank you for taking part in this. Thank you very much.
All right, and now we hear from planning and zoning officer Debbie Zarkowski.
Hi, guys. Good morning. I'm really happy. Hi, Matt. I'm really happy to be here today, honestly. I would have asked to give some welcoming remarks for this kickoff of Regions 1, 3, and 9. I was asked to share a story about an experience with the planning process that I had been a part of. And I thought, oh my, what can I share to inspire you or make you cringe? Because I've seen it all. There are many planning processes that I've been involved in. While this isn't any one experience I have chosen to share, it is instead more of a feeling. And that is a fresh sense of opportunity a planning process evokes. There is opportunity for staff to engage with the community to truly hear what residents want their communities to look like. After all, it's where you all live, work, and play. Opportunity that we would work together to thread the words in the plan to reflect what places like Brooklyn Park, Hanover, Glen Burnie, Mayo, and Deal would look like. So fresh opportunity awaits you in Regions 1, 3, and 9. You have graciously volunteered to be a part of the planning process, similar to how Jansen was talking, for your communities. This opportunity carries forth the implementation of Plan 2040. You will be working on so many important things like how we use our land, how it is zoned, putting forth environmental protections, planning for our public facilities like our parks and our libraries, and also how we move, be it by car, bus, bike, or rail. Part of being a member of a collective group such as the SACs is to listen and listen a lot. I have learned so much from people I have never even met. And oftentimes we'll hear a perspective that perhaps you never even considered. When you think about this, it's going to be fun and rewarding. And in the years after this process concludes, you will see the fruits of your efforts. Yes, years, because long-range planning is a marathon, not a race. But you do see the results. And I can tell you, it's pretty downright neat to see what you have put on paper come to life in our physical world. It actually is pretty cool. So have fun with your fresh opportunity. And it is not lost on me on how much of your time will be invested in this planning process. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to make our communities the best place for all. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Daniel Burns. Burnham was a famous architect and urban planner, and these words as a planner have always resonated with me. Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans. Aim high in hope and work, remembering that a noble, logical diagram, once recorded, will never die, but long after we are gone, will be a living thing, asserting itself with ever-growing consistency. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited that we are kicking this off today. Thanks, guys.
Thumbs up here. Thank you, Jenny. And now we have Mike Stringer, who will be talking to us about the region plan, giving us an overview.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for seeing slide, please. So you heard reference to Plan 2040, and let me kind of begin there. As we talk about these region plans, they're rooted in the countywide general development plan that we call Plan 2040. And this is our big countywide land use policy document that looks ahead for the next 20 years. It was just adopted by the county council in 2021. And it gave us the direction to create it mapped these 9 regions and directed the Office of Planning and Zoning to come out and work with community members to develop these more community-based plans in each of the 9 regions. The plan is built around these 3 big ideas that kind of evolve through the process. Thinking about county growing smart, that we can kind of curb some of the sprawl development that we've had. We can have smarter investments in our public resources, that we can grow greener, that we can protect our important environmental sensitive areas, that we can be more equitable. As mentioned earlier, we've all lived here. We've seen that there are some communities that seem to have it all and some that seem to always struggle. We want to be very conscious of that as we move forward and try to see how we can raise up all the communities in the county. This plan is organized with 4 big groups of topics: natural environment, built environment, healthy communities, and healthy economy. And with each of those, there are goals, policies, and strategies. And those goals and policies and strategies are all thinking countywide. And the real challenge of these regions is to think about how can we implement that in your community. And that's going to look different across different parts of the community. And that's why we really want to get this local input from this group as well as from the broader public in these plans to make sure that these make sense and are going to be workable where you live. So these 9 regions, this map shows them. And of course, today we're focused on region 1, which is the northern part of the county, Brooklyn Park, Linthicum, Hanover, the BWI Airport. And then region 3, kind of in the north and central, so Glen Burnie, Severn, parts of Millersville, out to Marley Neck. And then region 9, kind of jumping down to the south part of the county, our coastal areas. Thinking about Edgewater, Mayo, down to Deal Shadyside Peninsula, all the way down to North Beach. It's gonna be really nice and timely, I think, that we're doing 1 and 3 together. There's a lot of interrelated issues there, a lot of businesses, a lot of transportation issues that really interact there. And we intentionally separated out region 9 from the rest of what we often just call South County in the county because of the important coastal issues. So we'll be able to have more specific focus on that as we go through this process. We've theme of the other regions, regions 2, 4, and 7. They began at the end of 2021, and they are actually in front of the Planning Advisory Board next week to begin their kind of formal review process. There's been a lot of community engagement. There were stakeholder groups like this meeting over the last 2 years to develop those plans. And then regions 5, 6, and 8 will start up next year. So you're the middle round. We're doing them in sets of 3. The key elements of these plans, are of course going to be these groups and the meetings that you'll have over the next few months. We'll be doing evaluation of community needs and assets, thinking about what the vision is for the future, trying to get to neighborhood-specific strategies. And an important thing that we'll do after we kind of talk about these topics, we'll move over into zoning and land use. That ends up being a lot of people's focus and interest in these. We very intentionally want to talk about kind of topics first and get to the zoning later. So we set some context to say, hey, these are the values that are important to us. And as we look at a specific property, how does that relate to those broader values for the region? And of course, public engagement is really fundamental to this. You guys play a backbone role in that, but we're also doing a lot more engagement out in the community. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And we'll be bringing that information back to you and reflecting back to you so you have some more context as well about what else we're hearing from community members. Okay, slide. As we start these plans, we're going to be thoughtful of some guiding principles. And these are outlined in that region plan handbook that hopefully you've all had a chance to read through. But I want to think about inclusivity. Again, making sure that we've got as diverse a representation of the county at the table as we can. And historically, it's not been that way, right? Daniel Burnham was mentioned back when white men did all planning. We're trying to be more inclusive to get more different viewpoints into these planning processes. An important corollary is being respectful. As mentioned earlier, we're going to disagree with each other, but let's try to do that in a way that is civil, respectful. We all live here. We're all going to live here and be neighbors after this planning process is done. So let's try to make sure that we're building bridges and shared understanding as we go through this. Equity. We want to be mindful about decisions in the past and their effects that we've seen. There's a great report that's included in this. I know we give you a big drive of a bunch of folders and plans. There's one that I'll really highlight for you called Poverty Amidst Plenty. And it's prepared by our health department and partners at the Partnership for Children, Youth and Families. And it goes through and looks systematically at economics, at health outcomes. And you can dramatically see by where people live, it consistently shows up the same things, from low birth weight to shortened life expectancy. The big marquee there is that Brooklyn Park has the lowest life expectancy in the county, 15 years difference from just about 15 miles away over in Cape St. Clair and all. Those differences are dramatic. And as was mentioned earlier, the way that we think about development of communities, and there's a lot of factors that go into that, but the way that we develop these communities and think about the future of where we're making public investments and what different types of growth are on different places can help hopefully address those issues. So as we kind of just referenced with that, thinking about public health, economic vitality, and environmental protection. To be thinking about these issues as we go across and think about things like transportation and housing, these all have implications about these big themes about the quality of life, people's health, the opportunities they have for employment, and the quality of the environment that they live in. Slide, please. Now, the complicated piece. Planning in the county has a lot of different facets. This year diagram shows how some of these things fit together. That central big cog is that general development plan. That's the big, broad policy document that everything else is supposed to relate to and kind of coordinate with. Now, over to the left there, we've got our geographic master plans. So things like these region plans or the town center plans for Glen Burnie, Odenton, and Carroll, where we look at a smaller geographic area and think about how should the land use be developed? How should transportation work there? So kind of taking those big policies and making them more specific to a geography. Also, we have our functional plans. So each of the county departments that runs a program or a system, like our solid waste system, our sewer systems, our recreation park systems, they create functional plans that specifically focus on those issues. They get to be a little more technical. If you try to read through those, they might be 400 pages with a ton of data and analysis. And that's where things link up of saying, hey, if this is the kind of land use we want in this area, let's make sure that the sewer system is anticipating that and building capacity into that. That often then leads directly to projects in our capital budget. That's often where people say like the rubber hits the road. We have good ideas in our plans, but do they get funded? Do they get designed and built? And then on the other side of the house, on the right side of the diagram, are kind of the rules and regulations. An important thing I always think about when we're engaged in this process is that the county kind of sets the context. We can just set the rules of the road here of zoning, of how and subdivision regulations of what can happen on land. But of course, 90% of what you see out there is privately developed. So it's based on a willing owner, a market demand for it, and the capital and the capacity for someone to be able to build something. So we get to help guide, but it's ultimately the private sector that's going to drive things. Where and there's property rights enshrined in the U.S. Constitution that we need to be respectful of, as well as, of course, our state and county laws that kind of set our limits on what we can do. Okay, slide please. So thinking about our process here, we've set this up to be about a 2-year-long process. Before you guys even apply, staff started working at the beginning of this year doing analysis of these 3 regions. Looking at census data, looking at economic data, looking at trends in permitting to see kind of what's been going on in these regions, looking at our capital investments of what's programs to be coming in the future. And we're going out in the community as well. We started out with stakeholder interviews. We actually talked with a number of you in this room to get a sense about, what are the key issues that people are talking about in your neighborhood? Who else do we need to be talking to? How does your community like to communicate? What kind of events, what kind of places do we need to be to reach people? And then we started doing just that, going to community fairs, festivals, farmers markets, meeting with small groups of citizens and putting things online as well. And we've actually summarized those kind of initial findings of public outreach in documents from each of the regions. You can find those on our region websites. Encourage you to look at those. And now that you guys are together, we're kind of moving into this second phase of plan development, of thinking through the vision for the future and thinking through goals and strategies to address key topics like transportation, housing, and land use. As we go through that, we'll review that information with the public as well. and we'll share more of that with you in a moment. And again, after we talk through those topics, we'll then bring out the land use and the zoning maps. And currently, we're accepting applications from property owners for zoning changes. So we'll be informed by kind of what does the private sector want to be doing with their land right now that might be different than what they're allowed currently. Those applications are being accepted through November 30th. Staff will analyze those and then bring forward to you those applications, those recommendations. So you all get to take a look at them, make your own recommendations. And then once that's all pulled together, this all goes through public review through the Planning Advisory Board. They'll hold public hearings, where people can give testimony, and then ultimately goes to the County Council. They've got the ultimate authority to adopt a plan, to make any amendments to it. And again, there's public hearings, opportunities for public input at that point. So these meetings that we'll be having with you, we're trying to condense this down to basically have you meeting from kind of the school year, starting now, going through like June of next year. And this is different from that first round of plans that we did. Those folks met for like 2 years, and those committees were getting burned out. So we're trying to condense this a little more. We're going to very intentionally try to have these meetings be focused, interactive, and give you guys as much time and space for discussion. So we might ask you to stay a little bit late at night sometimes. We're going to try to be respectful. I've got kids at home that have a bedtime, but we're going to try to have fewer meetings, but maybe a half hour, an hour longer. So maybe it's more like a 2.5 hour meeting rather than a 2 hour meeting. And these are the topics we're going to go through. And we're pretty intentional about this order. We want to start with the environment and history to think about that context. Where have we been as a community? What are the real environmental constraints of where we are? And then thinking about economic development in schools. What are the employment opportunities? People and our situation with schools, of course, have this big redistricting process going on right now with the schools. So I'm sure you guys are aware of that. When we talk to people just in general about why they make decisions on where they live, it's often because of jobs, schools, and family. So we're kind of starting with that space. Then we'll move to housing and redevelopment. Of course, as I think everyone's now aware, we've got this huge increase of housing prices that's been happening the last few years. And if you remember back in the early 2000s, it was rising really fast there too before we hit the Great Recession. So we've got major issues with housing costs and supply that we need to talk about. And those are going to be difficult conversations. Then transportation and land use. Who here is concerned about transportation in the county? Yeah, this is everyone's top issue. Everyone hates sitting in traffic. So we're going to bring in our Office of Transportation, Department of Public Works. We're going to try and drag the folks from the state in, because we have so many state roads, to be able to talk about those congestion points, what's in the plans now, and you guys help identify what are the other things that need to be doing around mobility in the county. Then at the end, we'll talk about this land use and zoning matters. Okay. So the public input piece is going to go parallel to all your work. We currently have this vision questionnaire that you see on the posters. We have an online version of that on our websites. We've been taking these posters out to community events. We were just out at Art in the Park and the Olympicum Community Fair a couple weekends ago, sharing this out, trying to get public input. And when we get to that point later in the meeting, you actually can see there's some colored bars on these vision questionnaires and actually show the preliminary results of what we're hearing back from the community about these different elements of a vision statement. As you go through and do your work and develop your strategies, we're going to bring those out to the public. This is going to make us all a bit uncomfortable. So it might be kind of draft statements. We, the county, will be the most uncomfortable with that. But we want to get public feedback and see, are we going in the right direction? So we'll have, after you guys have your meetings and think about recommendations, we'll clean those up and put them on posters and bring them to public spaces like libraries and have people be able to drop in and see them and comment on them. We'll put them online so people can also rate them online. And then when we get to the zoning piece, similarly, we'll have web maps that can zoom in and look at properties. We'll print big zoning map posters and be out in public spaces, let people comment and look at those. And then, of course, at the end, there's that formal process with the planning board and the county council. One thing also note of interest, we mentioned that the inclusivity piece. We've had a hard time as a county, and this is every local government, I think, across the country, with reaching communities of color, reaching low-income communities, reaching renters. So we're trying something new that we've seen other jurisdictions do, when we actually are entering into grant agreements with a couple of nonprofit organizations. Up in Region 1, it'll be the Greater Bay Brook Alliance, and in Region 3, it'll be Kingdom Care. Groups that are already working with these different communities to try to help us figure out how best to engage with them. Hopefully we'll be piggybacking on programs they already have, and they'll take our technical jargon and put it in terms that people can understand, including especially in Region 1, we're going to focus outreach for the Latino community, so putting things in Spanish and talking to them directly. Okay, so then think about roles and responsibilities. I'll talk about kind of what you guys can expect from us and what we're asking of you. For you guys, this is going to be a learning and sharing opportunity. There is a wealth of knowledge in each of your groups, and we're really welcoming you to come share that and to come with open minds and listen to each other. And also to be willing to take a look, and we're going to try to make things as concise as we can, but to take a look at some of this county stuff that we've developed. I'm not going to ask you to read the 400-page technical water sewer plans. We're trying to boil that stuff down so you get the idea of some of the real infrastructure constraints and other issues that we have. So we're going to have some homework assignments between these meetings that we're hoping you're going to engage with. You've all, part of your application process was asking, how you're connected to communities. And we want you to stay engaged with your communities through this process and share information and ask them what they're thinking too. So that way, as you're coming in, you've got your perspective and hopefully also from other folks that you're engaged with, your neighbors, your community associations, etc. We're asking everyone to be constructive and collaborative. Again, we'll disagree, but let's think about how we can disagree in a way that's constructive, creates a generative conversation that moves us forward. Participation is key. Again, we're trying to have fewer meetings, so attendance is really important. If you're going to miss a meeting, please let us know. If you have to miss 3, we might need to talk about whether you've got enough, continuity to be able to continue to participate. And respecting the schedule, we do have a time frame to meet. We're trying to get these plans done and get into council. We can talk about any one of these issues, could be an entire plan of themselves. And you'll see that some of them are, like as we talk about, walkability and bikeability. The county just adopted a new bike and pedestrian master plan. We don't need to recreate those things. Hopefully we can reference them and kind of try to concisely address these issues. And then we're hoping that you'll continue to support the plan through the process. Those of you who are really wonky and into the county politics, you'll realize that what really matters is what the council adopts. And they can amend these plans freely. So we're hoping that as we move forward, we can build consensus with you guys and support. And that way, when it does come to council, you can be voices also to say, hey, here's why it's written that way. We would like you to keep it this way. Okay, slide please. What you can expect from us. We're going to work collaboratively with you. These plans work really well in my experience when the staff can bring technical expertise and you bring that local knowledge. So we're going to be bringing you a lot of information. We're going to try to condense it, make it accessible, make it as interesting as we can. And hope that you guys give your feedback. We'll be respectful of your time. I mentioned longer meetings. We're not going to keep it overtime. When we set a schedule, set a close time, we're going to try and hit that. We'll be the lead for community engagement. So like those activities we listed out, if you have associations that you work with that you would like us to speak to, or if you want to have a fact sheet that when you're talking to your civic association or your chamber of commerce, let us know. We can help you get material for that. And we can try to join you if you'd like, and if we can. We'll facilitate each of the stakeholder committee meetings. We'll provide you summary notes afterward. And we'll be the ones preparing the actual plan document. So we'll be your pen. So there'll be times when we kind of get these meetings and we'll say, I think this is the general direction we're going. Let us go back and draft something that you guys can review and advise. Wordsmithing in group context is so hard. So we're hoping that we can develop trust with you that you guys feel like that we can go back and work language. That we kind of refine things. Okay. A little bit more about communications. As you all saw kind of with your materials to join these committees, you are appointed committees, so we have to abide by the state of Maryland's Open Public Meetings Act. That means that like today, we're broadcasting these meetings. The public was invited to be able to attend. Not a lot are going to come on Saturday morning at 9 a.m., but I'm sure a lot will watch this video. All of our decisions need to be made in public. So we're going to need to do some kind of email management around that. So when we email you, we'll probably blind copy you all, and that'll prevent you from kind of sending a group email because we can't have group discussions about our business. We will filter things. We'll ask the public to send emails to us at these region plan addresses, and then we'll forward things on to you and let you know. But, okay. We're going to go into our group discussions. We intentionally not have you all introduce yourselves yet. We're gonna let you sit, you're all at your region tables. We're gonna let you do those introductions at this next stage. So that way kind of, you're not hearing 45 names, you're just hearing 15. Great thing about this room and why we chose this is that these are accordion doors. So we'll close these off and you'll be able to kind of meet and discuss individually.
Could I ask a question that's lingering for me after you said something? You said that about 90% of the land in Anne Arundel County is privately owned, and we have to respect the, the decisions of the private owner. So that leaves us 10% that we can, I'm wondering, what's the extent of our influence if that's the case?
Yeah, let me refine the statement. It's not 90% of the land, it's most of the development that you see. When you drive down the street, most of the buildings that you see were built privately. The houses, the businesses,
Okay,
what the public builds are like our schools, our parks. So by land mass, we actually have a large amount of the county that's publicly owned.
okay,
But with these plans, you will have a lot of influence on what private development can do, right? As we, in particular, when we get to this land use and zoning piece, and we'll talk a lot more about zoning as we get closer to it. But the idea of zoning, it's an old idea in planning that started in the early 1900s. And it says, we're gonna map out the town, map out the area, and we're gonna identify different zones and say, okay, over here, you can build residential. Over here, you can build industrial. And what started out as being a handful of categories is now dozens of categories in our county code. So, it'll say that, okay, this can be residential, but you have to have, 1 house per acre, or you can have 5 houses per acre. And so that has a huge influence on the development of those areas. So that's a tremendous area of influence that you'll have here. A note about zoning, because I just can't not say it. There's good and bad to it, right? The initial idea, one of the good ideas of it was, hey, we shouldn't have apartment buildings next to factories and all the noise and air pollution, especially thinking about like the early 1900s. But it also, and in the city of Baltimore is one of the great cases points, it was explicitly racist. It said this is where Black people live, this is where white people can live. And zoning has across the country in this county led to segregation of communities by income and by color. And that's something we wrestle with. It's still one of our fundamental tools that we use, but we're trying to think about ways to reform it. We'll be looking for you guys' input as we make these choices. To wrestle with that issue, that legacy. Any other questions before we get into the breakout groups? Yeah, Mr.
Your
Miller.
slide talked about an advisory group for this process. Who are they? What's their role?
I think it was referencing this group as the stakeholder advisory group.
The initial.
Then you have the PAB.
Oh, yeah, the planning advisory board, yeah. So the planning advisory board is appointed by the county executive. They review master plans as well as the capital budget every year. So after this committee develops its plan, it'll go to that planning advisory board. They'll review it. They're doing that next week, actually, for regions 2, 4, and 7. Yeah. And then after they review, then it goes to county council.
That I took part. I don't think it's going to be boring on any level. It won't be tedious. The exchange of ideas are gonna be fun. But I also want to take this time to introduce the county executive. I know I'm gonna say.
For the boring part.
I want to say some nice things about him. It's not just because he signs my check. But he was the one that spearheaded Plan 2040. And it's a visionary general development plan that incorporated as one of his foundational principles, environmental protection, equity, inclusivity. And so he wanted to make sure that we had these small area committees so that when people were looking at their respective communities, their neighborhoods, that they get to have the same level of stake in the community. It's not just the bureaucrats at the top and the planners that are making these decisions, that you all get to be educated, but moreover, you have a role and shape in this. So without further ado, County Executive Stuart Pittman.
So I know a lot of you. The rest of you are names on a spreadsheet that we were painstakingly moving around, trying to figure out how to make each of these groups diverse in terms of where people live, and what their interests were, and every other measure of diversity, and it was complicated, but from what I've heard walking in, at least the staff who's been part of it told me that these are 3 amazing groups, and everybody's really excited, so I hope you all feel that way. This is, I mostly want to tell you how important this is. I want to first thank you for stepping up, because this is a big commitment. You know, you're gonna be plugging away at this for 2 years, so. It's a big commitment, and. At least all the staff. Every day, you're coming every day. But there's gonna be, I know there are gonna be times where it's tough. The reason that we're doing these is that, well, I ran on it. No, seriously, when I was meeting with people about running in 2018, I talked to some people who were part of the small area planning process. There were 16 plans in the county back in the early 2000s. And I also know that even the county executive at the time thought it was a huge headache. And a lot of people said that it was just too much work, and they had far more staff at planning and zoning back then in long range planning. I think they did them all at once too, which was probably not a great idea. But the residents who were part of it, the ones who talked to me anyway, just told stories that they inspired me. And when I think I got the last copies of it that were actually printed in the office while I was running. I went and got a copy of each one. And even though they were online, and I would carry them around in my car as I was going around and meeting with communities, and I marked them all up and I read them. And I know that what you produce is going to be read by people who run for office. It's going to be read by everybody who's trying to improve the communities that you're representing. So while there's always a question about plans, whether they're going to sit on the shelf and not be used, but even if not everything is implemented in it, it's going to impact the thinking of the movers and shakers for the next decade. So keep that in mind as you're doing it. I want to also talk a little about the experience that we had in the first round, mostly that the staff has had in the first round. But I heard from people directly as well. And there were a few things that sort of struck me. Some I knew were going to be issues. One was people who came in with an agenda. I know there were a lot of efforts to get people to open their minds and listen to one another, but there were some who thought, for instance, that developers shouldn't be on them. And you know what? When I ran for office, I was sort of saying some of the same stuff. I was saying that, people who are going to profit off it shouldn't be the ones making decisions. My thinking evolved on that a lot, particularly in the areas where there is going to be significant amounts of development and where the general development plan 2040 says we need some development. We need housing, we need transit-oriented development, we need to build things, we need to build libraries, we need to build parks, we need to build a lot of these things. Sometimes we have public-private partnerships to build those things. And if the people who build stuff aren't at the table, they aren't really going to, nobody's going to have their perspective, which doesn't make sense because they have to tell us what they think is feasible in the marketplace. But they might end up building something that's in the plan. They might see an opportunity there and will benefit from it. And then there are the folks who come in who've been involved in these issues, advocating for a long time in their community groups. And I have been insistent that those people be at the table, but sometimes they've been at it for so long and they know so much that they don't have a lot of patience with the people who come in new. And it's absolutely essential that we bring in the people who come in new because they have a fresh perspective. And often those are renters versus homeowners or people who've never thought about being part of a planning process. And I got to tell you that this stuff turns me on. I hope it turns you on. Planning is really where it's at. It's so creative. It's so exciting. to be able to envision, look at what a community is and envision what it can be and figure out how to put all the pieces together. You can't control the future. Not everything is gonna get built. Some things are gonna get built that maybe aren't quite what you envisioned. But if there is a plan, people really do use it. The zoning that comes out of this, we wanted to do these region plans before the county council got a hold of rezoning, did comprehensive rezoning. So it used to be that the whole county, it was done, there was no community-based planning before it. Even the small area plans, I think, were done after rezoning. So my hope is that what you all come up with is gonna hold the county council members accountable. They're gonna be embarrassed or afraid to override in the zoning what you say, because so much work got put into it, and hopefully they're gonna be connected to you. But legally, they can do anything they want. So, you have to do a good job, and you have to engage the communities so that the politicians who need to get reelected in the next election, listen to the communities and listen to you. But generally, they're allies. Hopefully, they see the world the same way that you do. I also want to say, this sounds kind of bad, but do your homework. Read this stuff. Please, especially read Plan 2040, because that to me is, we say it's smarter, greener, more equitable. It's a lot of things, but when you look at it, it's a lot of policy proposals. There's legislation that's before the council now because it was in Plan 2040. There's this proposal that we have right now that's before the county council to do moderately priced dwelling units. It's tough if you're a developer for the government to tell you that you have to do 15% or 10% and certainly make it affordable for certain income levels, but it's been in Anne Arundel County's plans for decades. The Chamber of Commerce was calling for this years ago. Most of our neighbors have done it, and we've had a lot of conversations back and forth with developers about how to make it work, and we really think it's important, but we couldn't get away with doing it if it hadn't been in 2040. There's a lot of really good work that went into that. And so if what you propose for your region is in Plan 2040, it's gonna be a lot easier to get done. If it's completely contrary to Plan 2040, that's gonna make it tougher, but you just need to know where that is. The other thing I would say, because I was reading this morning, reading these websites, the amount of work that's been done in each of these three regions already by the staff is extraordinary. I couldn't believe the maps. I knew that was going on, but you can zero in on the maps and little neighborhoods, and people say what they like, what they want to change, or what they'd like to see, and it's you can actually read everybody's comments, and I find that fascinating, and I think everybody who's a leader in their community should be reading that stuff. And then it's been summarized. There's what do you call it? I actually wrote it down. You're calling it the outreach summary report, community outreach findings, the preliminary findings. It's like 12 to 15 pages on each region, and it identifies proposed projects. It has maps of them as well as what people are saying in the initial outreach. And I know there's outreach going on now. I know there's rezoning applications that are going to start coming in, and that'll be fascinating for you to look at. But I think the more that you actually take the time to look at that stuff, the better, more fun you'll have doing this. I guess I also want to just identify a few of the things that are difficult, that have been difficult in land use in general, because you'll be confronting some of these things in your region plans. One of the things that I always knew that building anything is controversial. You change anything. I live on a farm, and when I decided to build a barn that was bigger than the barns that we had before, because you could ride horses inside of it, and it was part of my business to be able to do this training in this barn. My mother, my sisters, nobody wanted me to do it because it was something different. It was change, and they were worried about traffic, and they were worried all the things that any neighborhood. And believe you, I get all of that. When it's some of the stuff that brings people out the most, I think, is when it's the government doing it. So these plans and the small area plans have all kinds of proposals for parks and things. Parks are really controversial. Some of the people in this room know just how controversial that could be. And the process of designing parks is difficult. Trails, we have a trail right now in District 1, right here, that is controversial. So, you know, I would encourage you to get all the information you can on pedestrian and bike trails and what them. I was just in Twin Cities in there's a group, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, that does Chesapeake Connect trips. If you read my little weekly letters, I just wrote about it. Just got back from Twin Cities, and they take you out into different communities. They divide us up into groups, and I got to ride an electric bike on a new trail. They call it something Midway Greenway in Minneapolis, and used to be rail, now it's trail. Most of it's through an industrial area, so I don't think they had quite the opposition from the neighbors the way we did on all the trails really that have been put into our county. But now what they have is this coalition that sort of manages the trail in a lot of ways, and they have little community gardens. Some housing's been built along it, and it kind of gives you an idea of what a trail can mean for a community. Hopefully you'll be doing that kind of research and looking at the impact of some of these things. I would say that, you know, in addition to the Plan 2040, the green infrastructure is something that many of us feel very strongly about, and you hear it when you listen to people. We have created this thing called the Green Infrastructure Master Plan. Hopefully you'll be looking at it and identifying the places that we're trying to protect and actually protecting them is a whole process and a whole science and a whole world in itself. So we are looking at properties. Properties are becoming available. Sometimes it's because a land speculator bought land that they were hoping to develop, and because of forest conservation or whatever it is in the code, and the way it's being implemented, they're making a decision that maybe it's just not worth the trouble. And then they're calling the county, or they're calling one of the land trusts that actually acquires and preserves land, and they're open to negotiation. And that is going on in some of your areas, and we want to hear from you on that. What I would also say though is that sometimes an opportunity pops up and you either move on it or it goes away. And this can be a development opportunity, something that there's pretty much consensus that is overall good. Maybe not everybody agrees. That might not be, we can't necessarily wait for your plan to get done. So there may be situations where we or a county council person is coming to you saying, what do you all think about this happening? You know, is this consistent with where you're heading? I know some people will argue that nothing should be done that's not in a plan, and therefore it has to wait. But just keep in mind that there are opportunities and there's a marketplace that's moving, and sometimes we have to jump on those. And that includes acquiring land for green infrastructure. Yeah, so I guess I really just, the thing that is going to be the hardest for you probably is both representing an interest that you come in with. Some of you feel like you represent a group, maybe it's a neighborhood group, with a perspective, and then sitting down at a table with people who have other perspectives and having an open mind and hearing what they have to say. And that's going to be the beauty of this. I think you're probably all going to grow from this, and you're going to learn a ton. Maybe it'll help you in some of your work as well, outside of this. And there's going to be great value to the county. So thank you. Just thank you. Oh, and be kind to the staff. You know, the long-range planning staff and plan and zoning, I think, is developing a reputation as being like the best in the business. If you talk to people around the state, if you look at the awards that Plan 2040 got, we won the state award, the sustainability award from the Maryland Department of Planning. And I think you'll pick this up pretty quickly. But we've got an extraordinarily good team. I don't know how it happened that such smart and great people all came together all in one department.
Take credit for it.
Want to take credit? But it really is an incredibly valuable team. You know, the role of the staff versus the staff obviously creates the process. There's always gonna be, I know in the first round, there were some people who came up with their agenda and they sort of blamed the staff for not getting their way, and that's natural, that's why you get paid, right? I get blamed for everything. My own perspective is that they're really damn good, and they do want everybody's perspective at the table.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Do we want to do questions, or I don't know what your schedule's like, but.
We're gonna do photos.
Oh, photos, okay, not
Yeah.
questions, huh?
Photos, I mean, we can if you are open to that.
I'm open to all that, to questions, your schedule.
Okay, all righty, yeah, up in front, please.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I'm Arundel Wimbush. I'm the daughter of somebody who calls your office every day and communicates avidly. And we are located in
You're not
region.
gonna name that.
We advocate for the Region 1 area, and I just wanted to know, like, and then this is also for staff as well. Through your process of trying to engage the community and outreach into the community, is there any plan to create some type of funding or fund or grant to community members or to community organizations to assist in the process? I know a lot of times, people within this regions, it's time versus money, right? And so sometimes with the help and support of being able to just be funded for that, 30 minutes to an hour, 2 hours to 3 hours of doing outreach, the funds greatly help their families and help, to help supplement that time that they're spending and doing this very important work for their community. So I just wanted to know if there was any discussion or plans around that.
We do.
Yes, and I'm gonna pass it to Mike
Yeah,
Stringer.
no, 'cause I remember seeing it in the budget, saying yes.
That's a wonderful idea. I mentioned earlier that we, entering into grant agreements with two nonprofits, one of them based out of Brooklyn Park, Greater Neighborhood Alliance, and then one of them on Kingdom Care and focusing kind of on those Severn and Glen Burnie areas. And so that's gonna give us some additional capacity and some folks that are already networked into some of these more diverse communities. And also gives them some flexibility of, we haven't crossed that bridge yet of actually like, some of the way you're kind of stipends,
Yeah.
saying, hey, come to this meeting, we'll pay for your time. We haven't crossed that bridge yet, but those being nonprofits, they have a track record doing some more flexible things that'd be hard for us to do. Like, for example, I know one of them recently did some surveys, right, at the grocery store and saying, hey, I'll give you a gift card to this grocery store if you fill out the survey with me. Again, like you said, kind of making it worthwhile somebody's time and getting into those spaces that it's harder for us as government officials to show up at. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was some grant money and in the budget for the first time ever, we had never done that before, and it came from OPC from their first round. Some neighborhoods need it more because people just aren't used to participating or they don't know that they, District 9, we had so many applications for, how many do we have? Like every resident of District 9. The outreach.
We have a question here in the middle.
I have a tagline question, actually. So I'm super excited to be here and involved in this, and I want to understand the appropriate amount of energy I should put into talking to communities that I know, or like, should I reach out to additional, should we all be striving for maximum communication with everyone we know? And how do we carry the message? Like, I know you mentioned earlier about some fact sheets and things like that. So that's my general question of expectation for us, and so we don't go too far. And I could go like, I could talk about this all the time, every day. So
I should let one of you guys, staff, answer that, having been through the process before but I would just say that, it's, my philosophy is there's never too much community engagement. Sometimes it is difficult and time consuming for me, for all of you guys, but bring it on, baby,
Yeah, I would say the more the better. I mean, what you can
Sustain.
yeah,
As a volunteer.
because you're already volunteering for this committee and we completely understand you have a personal life and, and you're involved. I know Carly said you are, this overactive with volunteers, right, and stuff. You may not have as much. So that's just as much time as that you can get, we appreciate it.
Cindy, can I speak to that from the 2040 plan?
Yes.
What is my experience, I think Anthony did as well, is once the communities you're part of know you're part of this, they will come to you and say, how would you like to come to our board meeting? How would you like to come to the Galesville Town Hall? How would you like to? So people will seek you out as well as you telling the people you're connected to what you're doing. So it's just an additional data input. Because you're there, they will find you.
Somebody in the back, you had your hand, you were about to jump out of your chair.
Oh, no. I'm loud enough, I don't need to jump. Just following on the first question regarding funding. Not sure if you all have thought of, or if you're doing anything of this nature, racial equity cohorting or racial equity planning or intentional racial equity work. As we do planning, as we do budget, City of Philadelphia, for instance, has brought in consultants to do racial equity work with the city. So not sure if that's something that you have considered or thought of or not, and I would encourage it.
If we wanted to respond, feedback to her. I have a separate question, but I want to make sure.
Talk about it. Well, so, in terms of the exact model for doing it, our Office of Equity and Human Rights, Asha Smith, is overseeing all departments attempting to increase community engagement among underrepresented communities who haven't engaged. In plan and zoning, and particularly for this process, long-range planning. I mean, Vincent, maybe I'll speak to some of this as well from community engagement and constituent services, how we've gone about it. But we are definitely looking for more ways to increase it because it has been really frustrating. I mean, particularly in Region 9, those hundreds and hundreds of applicants were almost all white homeowners. And it was really hard to get the diversity in District 9. But all of them, we have had people go out and speak in churches, Black churches, to get people in. Do you want to add anything, Vincent, or how that works, or?
Sorry, before, just to add, it's not just increasing representation, but also looking at the equity in the planning and zoning, and looking at the equity in the bike riding, or everything else. So it's more than just representation, just wanted to add that.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that part per se, that is more of an OSHA question, but we do have an office who is charged with taking a look at that and making sure that we use the equity lens and apply to all aspects of the team. But we're also relying on people like you to make sure we're doing that work too, right? So thank you for calling that out and making sure it's at the forefront of our minds.
So I wanted to ask about the, when we have an opportunity to gather the feedback that we were talking about from our communities, right? Having a framework to gather it and then have it relevant for the next discussion would be helpful, whether that is a list of prompts. Because, I have a community organization and involved in others within Anne Arundel County. So if I could send out, hey, I'm involved in this activity, here's 5 prompts, 5 questions that respond from the perspective of the community. That would help me, will take some of the load off of me to have to plan it myself, but then also make sure that it's applicable to the next meeting, right? So I'm just not gathering random feedback. I'm gathering feedback relevant to the next discussion. So any framework like that would be very helpful.
There's a survey that's still open till November 1st, right? For public input. So I'd say like getting the word out about that being available, because then that allows the staff to condense all those responses and have a nice way. Is that what you're talking about?
So that could be one of the points that's listed on there, as in here's an action that your group can take, like actions you can take, and then areas to provide feedback. So if you give 3 or 4 prompts, provide feedback in these 3 areas, whether it's one of the things listed on the questionnaire relevant to the next topic, but then also say, here are some action-oriented things that you can do on your own, provide feedback, various things along the way. That gives us the scaffolding to then bring the feedback in a way that's digestible. Because I just worry if we all go out there to organizations and all gather different feedback in different formats, trying to combine that into something actionable, is gonna be difficult.
We hear you, and I think we'll work on that. I think it's a fabulous idea that we make sure we have, you know, nuggets that can get sent out.
Yeah.
That you all can distribute easily, so we can get information back.
I have a question about, the activist process. When it's in the book. I was fortunate enough to be on the small area plan 20 years ago. And one of the things that came out of it, working in the old Shadeside area, was how, from the communities, was how grateful and how happy they were to have such localized input in their future. But once the plan is on the shelf, what is the process with long-range planning to pull the book off the shelf every 2 years, every 5 years, every 10 years? This is a 20-year process, and there needs to be some kind of mechanism that long-range planning comes back to community leaders, long after our politicians have retired, and to make sure that we're on track, or we've gotten off track, how do we get on track, that kind of thing. I have complete confidence that we're gonna come, everybody here is gonna, we're gonna walk out of this thing with a pretty good plan for each of our communities. But I don't have a lot of confidence that 10 years down the road, too many people will have remembered it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was, like I said earlier, there were a lot of negative comments from people in public office about the small area plans. After them, council members didn't like the small area plan because they want to do something that wasn't in it, or they didn't agree with it, or whatever that was. And the follow-up work didn't get done that was supposed to get done on them. And so I know I kind of drove OPC crazy in the first year when I said, could you please do all 16 plans, every recommendation and the status of them? And so there was that document. And then I said, oh, now we're gonna go around and have a meeting in all 16 areas and see how people felt about it, which was a lot of work as well. But this time we have a lot, both for Plan 2040, but I believe, and you guys can speak to this, what the reporting process is. Plan 2040 is an annual report updates, and it's fascinating. We've got 2 now, I think 2 years. And they go to the council and they're very specific, and I don't know who doesn't, they work there behind off doing it. So how's it gonna work on the
Well, we intend to also be, reporting with each of the, region plans as we do with Plan 2040. So they're out on our website. You can see the progress that's made. In addition, midpoint, there's analysis that's done that says, okay, this was a strategy to make, to help this issue. Is it working? And then that's where we'll say whether or not, okay, maybe it's not working as well as we thought. So the next round, we need to keep an eye on that and adjust. So this is an iterative process.
You can't wait 20 years. When you do
Right.
your analysis,
It's the,
whether it's 5 or 10 years, it needs to be, you need to go back to the community where it was generated. And
yeah, so these plans are done, every 8 years. It's in our code, that they will follow the general development plan. We'll do an update. It may not look the same as this, the process may not, but it will, at least there'll be an opportunity to look at that plan. But we'll do it way before. So like in 4 years, we'll do this analysis. Is the strategy working the way that it was intended to? And then if it's not, when the plan is updated 4 years later, we can adjust. So it's not 20 years
And it wasn't supposed to be 20 years for the smaller plans. The assumption was it's gonna be done with a general development plan, which was 12, now 8. The political decision got made not to do them.
Okay, let me add one more thing about implementation. So we are the Office of Planning and Zoning, and planning is planning for future implementation. But so much of the implementation that happens in a county, it happens outside the Office of Planning and Zoning. The biggest pieces that we're responsible for implementation are zoning maps and zoning code, development code. But outside of that, a lot of this comes down to, can it get funded in the capital improvement program and ultimately make it into the budget for construction? So I think one of the big things that has to happen with implementation is we can't finish the plan and then have everybody walk away from it and assume it's gonna do everything it has to do. We really need the SAC members, the people that you are liaising with in your communities, to keep the pressure on to say, hey, 170, it's complete gridlock at 3 o'clock. We need to bring the force to look at widening that road. So I would say my challenge back is everybody's got to stay involved and you've got to stay on it. And there's more implementation is going to come from many more agencies than just the Office of Planning and Zoning. Okay.
And we've invested a lot of time with the other county departments to make them understand the Plan 2040 process as well. And they're our partners. They understand the strategies. Mike sits down with them regularly, goes over the strategies that were adopted that they're responsible for implementing, and to make sure that we're staying on on a schedule that's working towards implementing these strategies. So we're envisioning the same for the region plan strategy.
All right, with that, we are out of time.